Good morning, everybody. Well, what a surprise. We woke up this morning and it was snowing, and there's snow on the ground. This is just flurries. This is snow in April. But what are you going to do? I don't think it'll be around too long. So take courage with that. Those of you who are wondering whatever happened to spring. Well, today we are going to get into the book of Ruth with all the bloodshed and the battles and the killing of Joshua and Judges. Isn't it nice to get into a love story? Something very diverse from what we've been covering the last few weeks. And that's just like the Lord. He's a God of diversity. Ruth portrays Christ, our kinsman redeemer. Our kinsman redeemer. More on that a little bit later. It's a book of redemption. And the key verse in the book, I'm going to read a well-known verse, chapter 1, verse 16. It says, "But Ruth says, 'Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God.'" Famous words here. Ruth takes place in the middle of the Judges. A lot of commentators think it's during the time of Jephthah, or at least the early days of Samson. So we have Ruth being a Moabitess, which, if you are remembering your lessons in Genesis, is a land, a member of a race under a curse, the descendants of Lot. And she also, through this story, as we'll see, becomes a type of the Gentiles who would come in and share with Israel the blessings of redemption. The Lord's Gentile bride, if you will. She precludes Pentecost, the inclusion of a heathen people to the Lord. So the story starts with famine, not so much oppression from an outside enemy here, but a lot of times a famine will reflect spiritual famine, disobedience, failure, chastisement from the Lord upon his people, Israel. And so there's a family here, a man by the name of Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, who marry eventually Moabite wives. But they're in Israel, and famine is in the land. A lot of the people stay there to wait it out, wait for prosperity to come, but Elimelech doesn't do this. His name means God is king. And yet, rather than really wait for the blessing of the Lord to return on the land, he moves out of the will of God by entering a foreign land. He migrates to Moab, which is a land that is given over to idolatry and occult practices. So with that, he takes his two sons and his wife. They leave probably 100 miles into Moab, and they settle there. The famine here, I think, represents a trial. A lot of times when Christians go through trials, they don't have patience. They don't wait on God. They don't pray, "Lord, what are you trying to teach me in the midst of this?" They flee. They just, "Get this away from me. I don't like this." And what happens? A lot of times they're just moving around in a circle. The trial repeats itself, maybe not right away, but eventually, whatever it is, whether it's people or circumstances or whatever, we find ourselves facing it again, kind of going around the mountain, and here it is again. So misfortune happens. Elimelech dies. Doesn't say from what. Also, his two sons who marry Moabite women, Mahlon and Chilion, they die also. Could have been a disease or something of that nature. Now you've got three widows, Naomi and the wives of her two sons, Orpah and Ruth. Three widows. And Naomi doesn't want to be called that anymore. She calls herself bitter, which is Mara. Trials, if we let them, can do this. They can make us bitter if we don't have the right attitude, the right posture, the right mindset of seeing God in them and his grace getting us through them. They're to prove us, especially our character. So Naomi, before all this happened, she took upon herself to teach Orpah and Ruth about the God of Israel. She was very pleasant. In fact, her name means pleasant one. And she is one who taught them and manifested a spirit of love and taught them about the God of Israel, winning their love and their confidence. So now she makes a decision. She's free of her own accord to make a decision. She hears in chapter 1 that the Lord visited his people in giving them food. Verse 6. This is Bethlehem, which means house of bread. So she desires to go back to her homeland. She's been gone about 10 years, and the daughters-in-law want to go with her. Interestingly, she has no faith for herself here or for her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. Instead of encouraging them, she repels them and says, no, stay here in this land, serve your gods, and may the Lord deal kindly with you. And she doesn't encourage them at all to go with her. Orpah leaves, and she also says, there's little hope for husbands for you in Israel. I myself cannot produce husbands, and Moabites are not looked favorably by Israelites. There's different customs. So Orpah leaves and goes back to her, probably her parents, her home. But Ruth, as we said in chapter 1, verse 16, where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God. She's not dissuaded, follows Naomi back to Israel. And this is where the story picks up here in chapter 2. Naomi is barely recognized by some of the people. Is this Naomi? She was a wealthy woman, more than likely, when she first lived in Bethlehem, and the years have taken a lot away from her, probably her appearance as well. Hardness will do that. So she comes back, and she remembers the law of Moses makes provision for the poor, and they certainly are poor. The gleaning law, which during the time of the barley harvest and probably other harvests as well, you'd go out into the field and reapers would reap the grain, but they'd leave purposely some of the grain on the ground, and the harvester would pick it up at the sheaves and bundle them and bring them back so there'd be food for the family. So this is what she tells Ruth to do. Gleaning was also needed the permission of the landowner. In this case, we're introduced to a man named Boaz, a godly man, wealthy, very kind, gracious employer. He's a type of Christ, as we'll see in a little bit. Ruth is given greater favor and kindness than his other handmaidens. In chapter 2, verse 8, he says to Ruth upon meeting her, listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you, meaning she won't be raped. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw. She fell on her face, bowing to the ground, said, why have I found such favor in your sight that you should take notice of me, since I'm a foreigner? And Boaz replied, all that you've done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been reported to me. How you left father and mother, land of your birth, came to a people you did not previously know. May the Lord reward your work, and your wages be full from the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. As Naomi is witnessing this, women's intuition, she senses that Boaz has more than a casual interest in Ruth. He's attracted to her, probably a very attractive woman. And here's where God comes in. Divine providence leads her to the very field of Boaz. the kinsman redeemer, a close relative of Elimelech and also of his son, Mahlon. So this is the sovereignty of God. There are probably a lot of fields in Israel, but God directs her to this particular one where Boaz owns it. So here's, as it continues on here, and she always comes back with grain, wheat, barley for Naomi, and they eat. They're well provided for. And then in chapter 3, Naomi, Jewish matchmaker, devises a little plot here to get Ruth in a position for Boaz to notice her in a more romantic way. She says in verse 3, chapter 3, verse 2, "Now is not Boaz our kinsman?" It's been told her, "with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Wash yourself, therefore, anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. It shall be when he lies down, you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down. Then he will tell you what you shall do." And she says, "All that you say, I will do." This was a Jewish custom. There's nothing sexual here, okay? Boaz, after eating and drinking, winnows the barley, lays down, covers himself with a blanket, and he's out there basically to keep the grain from being stolen by thieves. So Ruth comes and she lays down at his feet, and then she uncovers, or the blanket, she puts the covering over herself, and it wakes Boaz up. He says in verse 9, "Who are you?" And she says, "I am Ruth, your maid. So spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative." What she's saying here, she's proposing marriage. And he says, "May you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first by not going after young men, whether poor or rich," which tells me Boaz was probably considerably older than Ruth, maybe 20 years older. And so he tells her, wait until the morning, go back. He gives her, again, a lot of grain, food, goes back to Naomi, and she says, "Wait now until you know how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest until he has settled it today." Verse 18. One thing Naomi forgot about was there was a closer relative to Elimelech, to the family, than Boaz. Boaz knows this. So he goes and he gets the elders of the land around the city gate, along with the man who's the closer relative. He's not named. And he's talking about a property, a piece of land that belonged to Elimelech, I'll get it right. And he says, "You being the closest of the kinsman redeemer," kin, relative, "you can buy this if you want. It's yours." And the man says, "Yes, I'll buy it." But he also says, "On the day you buy it," chapter 4, verse 5, "you may also are required you must also acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of the deceased, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance." This again was a law of Moses. If a man died having a wife, no children, the wife was supposed to, if there were, marry a brother so that he would raise up offspring through her and the family name would continue. So upon hearing this, the closer relative says, "I cannot redeem it for myself. I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Redeem it for yourself. You may have my right of redemption. I cannot redeem it." Some commentators say that perhaps he was already married with children, and polygamy really was not something that was looked upon favorably. Or perhaps he couldn't afford it. He would have had to support not only Ruth, but Naomi as well. Possibly he might have seen Ruth, he's heard about her, the Moabitess. I don't know if I want to marry a foreigner, cross-cultural differences and all that. Possibly he'd heard that Ruth's husband and brother-in-law and father-in-law all died. So maybe he was superstitious and said, I don't want to put myself in that kind of a position. Whatever the reason, he forfeits his right to the property and to Ruth. So he takes a sandal off, which is kind of a receipt here, and he removes his sandal and gives it to Boaz, saying, basically, you redeem her. Boaz does. So the transfer of this is to Boaz. He marries Ruth, and they have a child by the name of Obed in chapter 4, in verse 17. Obed, very little known in the scriptures, is the father of Jesse, more well known, Jesse, the father of David, who becomes the king of Israel. And not only that, Ruth is included in the ancestry of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1. A Gentile, a Moabite, sworn enemies of Israel. Isn't that amazing? Because of this whole process of her being redeemed by the kinsman redeemer Boaz. So this is the story here of how this all comes together. And Ruth is of a noble character. Instead of wallowing in self-pity or depression that her husband dies, she gets over that, the loss of her husband, and expresses her affection for him in her loyalty to her deceased husband's mother, country, people, and God. So it's an amazing story of how providence, sovereignty of God, directs people in their affairs. And the whole thing here, this plan is worked out. Naomi wanted Ruth to marry a husband who wanted her. It wasn't just a staged marriage where, it's arranged, if you will. That still goes on today, a lot of places in the Middle East. So Ruth, very noble, included in the ancestry of Jesus, and she becomes the husband, or her husband is Boaz, her son is Obed, and we see through that line, David is born. So that's the story of Ruth, and it marks an end of the era of the judges. Next week, we're going to start 1 Samuel. Actually, Samuel is, in a sense, the end of the judges, but he's also a prophet as well. So that's what we're going to cover next week, and we will see you then. And God bless. Don't let the snow discourage you.